Hey guys, welcome to The Great Escape. Very cool show lined up today. Storytelling, movies, moments in movies, all coming up right after this. The story of our lives is unfolding at every moment like a ribbon of events and occurrences that streams through us, letting us anticipate what's coming and look back on what has been, sadly, too often not actually paying that much attention to the part that is actually happening. How many of us capture events through smartphones or camcorders, distracted from the magic of the moment as it actually occurs? When we go to see a movie, we are paying for some magic that has been captured for us, painstakingly captured and crafted so that we can experience a life of someone else, with probably far more attentiveness than we experience the life that is our own. At least if the filmmaker has done his job right, we might be truly immersed in the events, our hearts pounding, our eyes welling up, just as if it were our own fear, our own loss, because our body will react to what the mind is thinking about just as if it were actually happening to the body. And that is why we go to see the movies, so that Liam Neeson can face the wolves, because we don't want to. I don't want to face a wolf. I might feel sorry for it, and then it might eat me. Or maybe the movie's a love story, and our own lives might be lacking romance. So for 2 hours, we are Cameron Diaz or Colin Firth, and we feel what it's like for everything to work out right. That is the movies. In the meantime, the story of our own lives continues to unfold. Mine is unsettled right now. The ribbon is twisting and turning and bending back upon itself. I'm sitting in an office, my office, at the legendary Pinewood Studios, situated in the British countryside in the county of Buckinghamshire. It's very green and rural, and yet in the midst of it have been shot almost every James Bond film ever made and the current batch of Star Wars films. That's public knowledge, so I can say that. And you know what? You'd never know. There are no stormtroopers at my window, although I may have seen one on an iPhone, unless you're a Disney attorney, in which case I did not see a stormtrooper texting on an iPhone 4S. I did not see that. I'm at my desk in my creative space, which I got to do creative things while I'm over here, like this podcast, and I have a crystal collection in here. I know I have a smoky quartz celestial. That is a fancy word for grouping of crystal points. It's like a blob of crystals all stuck together. That's an celestial. Well, my smoky quartz celestial is 380 million years old. And get this, it has, trapped inside of it, for the naked eye to see, a water and air bubble. 380 million years old. That's before dinosaurs. That water might have the organic origins of what evolved to be dinosaurs. It might have one atom of a small lizard with disproportionate legs and a bad attitude. So that's in my office at Pinewood. That's pretty exciting, right? 380 million years. That is a long story. That droplet of water must be pretty patient. More patient than me. I want something to happen now, right in this office. I want a dinosaur to hatch. 380 million years. A dinosaur probably walked over this smoky quartz celestial, and now it sat on my windowsill wanting to kill itself. It has seen the Triassic period. It has seen the Jurassic period. It has seen I'm not going to go there. I'm better than that. Okay, my Crampy period. That probably qualifies for my explicit rating right there. I'm in a funny mood. Okay, I've said it. I've only been back in the UK for just over a week, still kind of jet-lagged, and I'm not 100% sure exactly how long I'm here for. And it's all very strange. Although I'm British-born, I've lived in Canada and the US for a really long time. I was a child when I left the UK, so I've never even driven over here. It terrifies me. The lingo catches my ear and makes me feel like a foreigner. The queue's over there, love. That'll be 20 pence. Oh, he's a right wanker, that one. I'm a foreigner in my own land where people stand in queues and wankers roam free. And it's strange. Besides the obvious heavy skies and schizophrenic weather, I was also struck by the observation that British people have put on weight. Fast food culture and mocha lattes have made their way across the pond, and the unfolding story in the UK right now is that more than 1 in 16 people have diabetes, a figure that has more than doubled since '96. That's insane. The unfolding story. Moments in movies. That is the theme that drives us into today's conversation with someone I'm very proud to call my friend, a true gentleman, steeped in everything that is entertainment, and although his name is Polish, he is British through and through. Leszek Burzynski began his career in that iconic British institution, the BBC, and has subsequently spent more than 40 years in film, TV, theatre, and radio as a producer, director, writer, and performer. Sometimes filmmakers lend their time to friends in the corporate world to direct or produce large-scale commercials, and it is on one such commercial that I first met Leszek, and we bonded back in 2007. If his voice sounds familiar, it's because he starred in a series of Geico commercials in the US and is also currently the voice of Atlantis Resorts and Casinos. Truly multi-talented. Leszek's unfolding story has a cast that includes people like Harold Pinter, Michael Palin, Martin Sheen, and even a guest cameo by Elton John. And we're going to hear all about it as we dive right in, quizzing Leszek. This was recorded just before I left for my trip at his lovely home just outside of Los Angeles. Leszek Burzynski. Did you just casually get into voiceover? Or have you been at this a long time secretly? Because I don't remember you being in voiceover when we were hanging out.
What I used to do when I made films back in England, I would always do the radio voice.
Okay.
Or the police call, calling all cars, or whatever it would be. And from that, I started voicing little news pieces or whatever if they appeared in the film. And that's really how I started. And then, of course, I ended up directing a lot of voiceover people. And there's a tremendous knack to voiceover. It's a very skillful art, I think, and I don't claim to have the full skill of the art, but I have directed some excellent people, and you learn from watching them and listening to them.
Yeah,
the kind of person who turns up and does a beautiful job in 4 minutes and then walks out of the studio and you have your 1 minute and it's been done twice and it's perfect.
And they got their hourly rate for 4 minutes work.
They get better than their hourly rate, the good ones. They get a very substantial rate. But I think they're worth it because they're able to give exactly what it is you want, the timbre, the feeling, the emotion, and change it as you require. They have this incredible way of seeing into the words and being able to mold them to whatever it is the impact should be.
Right. So when you say you did the police voice...
Well, in a film, like, if it was on the police radio, calling all cars, there's been a robbery in Covent Garden, and Natalie Gray had her handbag snatched. All cars report to Covent Garden.
I see.
All right, and I would do the background voice or whatever. That's how I started, just doing.
Really?
And I actually used to do voiceovers. I started making little 8mm films when I was like 14 years old.
Wow.
And my dad was wonderful. He told me if I would get a part-time job on Saturday, I was a school kid, of course, he would match whatever I earned and buy me a cine camera, as they called them, an 8mm camera. And I did. I worked in a grocery store on Saturday. And, of course, I didn't earn enough to actually even put up half the cost of the cameras, but my dad bought me a camera, and I started shooting little films. And when I went overseas with the school, I would shoot a film of what was going on, 8mm. And there was a wonderful German projector called an OIMIG.
Okay.
And OIMIG enabled you to sync quarter-inch sound tape to the 8mm film on the side of the projector. So what I would do is I would record a voiceover for the film and put it with music, and then I would edit the film, like physically edit the film with a razor blade, and show the parents the school trip with music and my voice and the film.
Wow. At 14 years old?
Yeah, that's when I kind of started.
Wow.
And we went to Germany, we went to France and Italy and Russia, and that's how I was just intrigued by the idea that you could film something and then cut it and make it flow and put music to it and a little bit of voiceover. And then I even went so far as to buy white cotton gloves because I thought that's what editors wore when they cut the film so they didn't put fingerprints on it.
Well, it makes sense. And did you ever find out, is that correct? Did they wear white?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah.
I think in the early days they did because they used to physically handle.
Yeah.
Not the negative, obviously, but the positive that they were cutting, and they didn't want fingerprints on it. And actually the school I went to was Alfred Hitchcock's old school.
Oh, really?
And that, I think, really made a big impact on me. I used to go to school. It was quite a long way from where I lived. And I went by bus every day. And we would go by the greengrocery store that his parents owned. And there was a school picture from the early 20s, or late teens, I guess, of Alfred Hitchcock in a school picture. And the story is, they built a new school because that school was so far away. They built a sister school, and eventually I went to the sister school when I was about 14 or so, 15, and a check arrived, this is the story, one day, and it was from Alfred Hitchcock to pay for the school chapel in the new school.
Wow. What was the name of the school?
The Campion School. St. Ignatius was the school I went to that Alfred Hitchcock went to. That was in Stamford Hill in London. And then the Campion School was in Hornchurch in Essex. And that was built as a sister school because so many people, so many kids, it was an all-boys school. It was a Jesuit school, all boys, wanted to go to St. Ignatius, that they built a sister school on the other side of town to enable people to get into that school instead of travel all the way to the other one.
Did you have to be sort of from a religious family to attend these schools, or they were pretty relaxed?
They liked you to be Catholic. I grew up Catholic, but I'm not sure that all the kids were Catholic, honestly. They were very, very driven by academic scores. So,
okay.
Yeah.
This was the priority.
That was the priority. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
What did your dad do, by the way?
Oh, my dad, well, he was a slightly tragic character. He was born in Russia before it was the Soviet Union, had to escape when he was about 8 years old. His parents had to smuggle him out of the then Soviet Union because he was now a Soviet citizen. They didn't want to let him leave the country. And my family is Polish, and he was born in Ukraine. And Ukraine was always traditionally, it was quite a large Polish contingent there. So, my family had lived on that side of the border for generations, even though they were Polish. So he went out and ended up in Poland. And then in 1940, the war, of course, started in 1939. And in 1940, he found himself trapped on the Eastern Front, which was the Soviet Union front. My dad had been in counter-espionage because he spoke fluent Russian, having been born in Russia, and he also had papers, Russian papers. And the Soviets were interested in promoting communist cells within Poland, which was not communist at that time. And so he was not somebody who could have survived being picked up by the Russians. That would have been impossible. They almost certainly would have either imprisoned him or even perhaps executed him. So he headed in the opposite direction and actually came through the advancing Germans, ended up in Dunkirk. The British were pinned down in Dunkirk. He headed south and ended up in Marseille. And he got onto a minesweeper that was leaving Marseille. And it came up the North Sea and ended in Scotland. He was landed in Scotland and promptly imprisoned in Scotland because he had no papers, because he had burned them all in case he was captured.
Wow.
And he was in prison until a friend of his father's, who was with the Free Polish Forces, recognized him and vouched for him. And that's how he basically emerged from a Scottish prison.
Oh my gosh, as you were telling me this, I was thinking, oh, please make this have a happy ending. I was so worried.
Very happy ending.
Yeah, that is a happy ending.
But unfortunately, he spoke a number of languages, my dad, but English was not one of them.
Okay.
And after the war, he temporarily took a job in a factory, and there he remained. And for the rest of his working life, he worked in a factory.
What kind of factory?
It made rare metals like molybdenum and rare metals, but he was what they called back then euphemistically a process worker, which means that he basically worked on the floor with the furnace and actually the production side of the metals. So he worked 12-hour shifts.
So he was really the physical labor side of things.
Was.
Wow.
Yes, he was.
And how long had he been in prison in Scotland?
I don't know. Probably a relatively short time, but when he came out, of course, he joined the Free Polish Force, but he never went back to Europe. So he could never go back to Poland because in his passport, he became a British citizen. In his passport was stamped that the British government would take no responsibility for him behind the Iron Curtain.
Oh, right. Wow. Did he used to tell you some juicy stories?
Yeah, we had some pretty amazing... I think like so many men of that era and who had been involved with war, he didn't readily discuss things that had happened to him. It wasn't until after he died that my sister and I discovered a small box, and in the box were medal ribbons. And in the box as well was a little list of the medal ribbons written in his own hand. And one of the medal ribbons was for the Croix de Guerre, which is the highest French honor.
Wow.
And my sister sent a picture of it to the French embassy, and she got an immediate response, and they said, well, this is a Croix de Guerre that was awarded in the field by a French resistance commander. Your father must have fought for the French resistance.
Wow.
And we had no idea. And actually, between coming from obviously Dunkirk down to Marseille, the length of France, I assume he fought for the French resistance, and he never told me that.
Wow. What a story.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah. He was born in 1914, so 3 years before the Russian Revolution. But the war that he was involved with was the Second World War.
And what about your mum? Was she a homemaker or?
My dear mother was a country girl.
Okay. English, I guess?
English,
okay.
Yes, that was the English side.
Okay.
She had to leave school at the age of 14 because her father had 2 daughters and a son, and he had to use what resources he had to put his son through trade school so he could have a trade. Women were expected to marry, so they weren't expected to have to be educated, and he didn't have the resources. And my mother left at 14, left school, and went into service. And so she worked actually in a grand house in England. She worked her way up from kitchen maid. So if you watch Downton Abbey, my mum was one of those people, and she was a kitchen maid to start with, a scullery maid, as they called it. And she worked her way up to housekeeper over a number of years, and actually was in the house that is now the Russian embassy in London. That was the house that she worked in London. So she had quite an adventure in service, serving at one point as a lady's maid to an American heiress, Miss Sicily.
Just like on Downton Abbey.
Just like Downton Abbey, because it was quite common for Americans to bring their money into the British aristocracy and kind of to buy, in a sense, status as a result.
Right.
The British aristocracy were impoverished after the First World War and had tremendous problems keeping up those huge estates. And so American money came into British aristocracy and had a huge impact on the way things were run. So my mum was a lady's maid to Miss Sicily, who was an American, and they were the same age.
Wow.
And my mother told me these lovely stories about her that she got 1 day off a month, my mother, one day off a month. And on her birthday, Miss Sicily would give her a guinea, which was £1 and a shilling, which was the equivalent of an entire month's wages for her and my mother. And she would let my mother borrow dresses from her wardrobe and shoes, because they were the same size, when she went out dancing. She would say, Marjorie, my mother's name was Marjorie, anything you want in my wardrobe, just take it and wear it.
Oh, that's nice. So she had a kind lady of her own age
Who she was working for 12 hours a day. And as kitchen maid, she used to set the fires at 6 o'clock in the morning, and then she would put out the port and the cheese, etc., at like 10 o'clock at night. It was a long day.
She's really lived through that Downton Abbey era and she would have seen it through, I would think.
Yeah.
When would you say it died out, that era of people?
I mean, I think it was the Second World War that basically put an end to it. When England went into the Second World War, you know, there were multiple empires still barely holding on. And what the First World War didn't finish in terms of empire, the Second World War did. Like England lost India in 1948, 3 years after the war finished. Nobody would have expected that England would give up India, but it did. And I think that's exactly what really brought an end to this. My mother, during the war, actually drove a semi-truck. She used to deliver milk to the bases, the army bases. And so she trained to drive what we call an articulated lorry or a semi.
All right, Marjorie.
Yes. and used to deliver milk churns full of milk.
Oh, I bet she was very popular. Showing up, a young girl delivering milk to the troops.
Well, that's how she met my father, of course.
I was going to say.
She was delivering to a base. He had been transferred down to Suffolk, which is where she was, Suffolk in England, and she took out a cigarette to light the cigarette, and my father stepped in front of her and lit a lighter and said to her, may I light your cigarette? And that's how they met.
Isn't it remarkable?
Yeah.
One moment, tiny moment, and here you are.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Imagine if she was a non-smoker.
I know, that's right,
you
exactly.
Know?
Exactly.
Imagine if she was a non-smoker, seriously.
If she'd taken out a kind of a strip of chewing gum, he couldn't have done much.
And there'd be no you, and there would have been no us meeting in 2007, I think it was.
I know, Natalie.
Wow, well, this is all just delightful.
Well, that's what makes the world so fascinating, and why we're all storytellers. Because I think at the end of the day, that tradition, which is such a human tradition, the tradition of storytelling and being able to immerse yourself in events that you may not necessarily have yourself taken part, but that you are sitting with the person who did. Some time ago, I sat with a lady, she was 96, and she told me how she remembered as a little girl her grandfather having his Civil War friends over. And they would discuss the battles that they fought in the Civil War.
Wow.
And I'm sitting with a woman who was physically in their presence.
Wow.
And you realize storytelling is just an amazing thing, that it carries down actual events.
It is so fascinating, the draw towards it. And you and I mean, listeners, many of them probably may not have had the pleasure of getting to know you like me. Hopefully they will in this podcast. But we had, I think, a little extra bonding because we recognized we were both quite sensitive people. And literally, you just telling me when you said about the lighting the cigarette, I could cry. It's so sweet, that concept of a moment that changed and made your life.
Yeah.
But then I feel silly. Crying.
No, but I think that is, you see, you put your finger on something that I think is absolutely essential. And that is that at the core of a good story is an emotional event with which you can identify. That's the key. If you go see a movie that you really enjoy and that you will remember, it's because you have been able to identify with some event, some character in the film that maybe you haven't in any other way been able to do. But the film is compelling enough, it involves you enough that it draws you into those characters' experiences. And see, when I tell that story about my father lighting the cigarette, you become my mother in a sense. I mean, you know, you are able to understand how that was a seminal event. As small as it may be, it was a seminal event.
Yeah.
And those little moments are what make movies work, because they are the things that open the door to the bigger story.
Yeah, you just take out that moment and that movie falls flat. There's no movie without that lighting of the cigarette.
We remember, you know, you look at Casablanca, you know, we'll always have Paris. You know, that's a line that so many people can quote because of seeing that film. Nobody, I must say, under the age of 45, but...
I'm staying mum right now.
Not to worry. No, hope springs eternal. The first film, a professional film I ever did, the first full-length professional film, I should say, I was an AD, first AD, and it was Stephen Frears. And Stephen Frears, as you know, and I'm sure your listeners know, is a notable English director. And it was the first film that Stephen did for the BBC. And it was, for me, an extraordinary opportunity to work with somebody who came with quite a reputation to the BBC. And it was an Alan Bennett film. Alan Bennett, another remarkable English writer, wrote the script. And so this was a high-profile project. And Stephen is very actor-oriented. And I had also worked with Mike Leigh, another very actor-oriented director. And I had always felt myself that really what happened in front of the camera was all about the characters, how the characters were being played. And it's the actors you watch. I mean, let's be honest, there are people, of course, who watch the fast cars, but what makes a film work is not the car stunts at the end of the day, it's being engaged in the story.
Right, the driver.
The driver, why the stunt, why the fancy move, whatever it may be. So it came naturally to me to work much more with the actors than worry about, you know, the shot. Of course, the shot becomes important, but if you don't have anything to shoot, you can have the fanciest shot in the world. Right. I remember, I think it was Stephen even who said this to me once. I said to him, you know, about different shots, and he said, Lesh, he said, the shots are not what it's all about. You use the shot you need to tell the story. And if that's a static camera position for 1.5 minutes while two people talk to each other, that's what it is. Right. You don't need to fly the camera overhead or, you know, corkscrew the camera into their left eye or whatever. You know, there are so many ways these days with the equipment available and the different editing tools that we have to produce mind-bogglingly interesting and exciting shots. But at the end of the day, if the scene is working on a narrative basis, you can actually shoot it with a still camera and people will still remain completely engaged. Right. Yeah, absolutely. It starts and ends with the actors, of basically. Course. That's how I feel. I mean, let's face it, we watch a play and there's no cameras. So. And I direct plays, you know, I've always been involved with theatre and I enjoy the theatre very, very much. And I had a wonderful experience because I was invited to the National Theatre in London by Christopher Morahan, who was directing a play there, and he asked the BBC if they would release me to go and be his assistant. And this was a play that was written by Robert Bolt and produced by Harold Pinter.
Oh.
So I suddenly moved into an extremely rarefied atmosphere, theatre atmosphere on the South Bank, one of the most highly revered theatres in the world, I think. And I spent several months working with Chris on the play. So I had the opportunity to see high-level theatre as well at its best, and to go through the opening and go through the whole process of how you put a play together. And, you know, that stayed with me too. And I'd always been interested in theatre. When I was at the BBC, I directed and wrote a couple of plays of my own, because there was the opportunity to do that at the BBC. And so I've always kind of tried to stay in touch with theatre, where it truly is an actor's medium. Film is a director's medium in many, many ways, because as a director, you're the one making the cutting choices and the choices of what take you're going to use and how you're going to put one shot after the other. In theatre, once you have rehearsed the play and the play is up, you no longer have any control, which is extremely aggravating as a director. I would sit in the audience of plays that I had directed and want to shout out, "Natalie, remember, please, darling, you're supposed to move to your left after that line." And you just move to your right.
Right.
But that's okay. That's the actor's prerogative.
Yeah.
But it's very frustrating, I think, for directors in general,
it would be.
because you really cannot change anything once it's being performed.
No, that's right. What was Harold Pinter like to work with?
He was a dour man.
A doer?
Dour.
Oh, a dour man.
Dour,
Okay.
dour.
Okay.
As I remember, you know, he was not a very talkative person. He was pretty guarded about everything. I think partly the way people treated him, you know, because, you know, he was, of course, Harold Pinter. On the other hand, Robert Bolt, who was also extraordinary. I mean, wrote, you know, Lawrence of Arabia and what was the other one, the Russian one, you know?
The Russian one.
The Russian one. Can't think of the name of it. I got very friendly with him. I became very friendly with him. I called him Bob. He and I would go have coffee together, and, you know, being so close to a genius, because he was a bona fide genius, was one of the great experiences of my young life, and it molded me in so many ways. And, you know, I was impudent enough, if you want to look at it this way, or maybe ballsy enough to give him a script that, you know, I had been working on and ask for his notes.
Yeah.
And he gave them. He gave me notes on the script. He was so charming and so open. And that really, for me, has always remained a very, very positive memory of Bob. And one little thing that your, you know, listeners may be interested in, I would be in the rehearsal room every day. Part of my job was to work with the actors on rehearsals, sometimes off to the side on a certain separate scene, also to advise because of my background, Russian background. But Bob would also be there, and he had a little writing office off the rehearsal room, and very often things would change during the rehearsal. An actor would say, you know, Bob, I don't find this very easy to say, or they'd swap a line around, and Bob would go off and come back later with rewritten lines. And I said to him, you know, Bob, you told me you'd spent like 4 years writing this play, and yet an actor will make a suggestion, or somebody else even, or I might make a suggestion, and you will incorporate it and change the play. And I said, I'm really surprised at that. And he went, well, Les, he said, I mean, if somebody writes a line and I think it sounds better than the one I wrote, and I put it in the play, it's still my name at the end of the play. It says written by Robert Bolt. However, there are some lines in this play that no matter how hard an actor finds to say them, they will learn to say them, and I will not change them.
Right.
And it was a little lesson, you know, for a 20-something-year-old aspiring director.
Yeah, that's right. He knew how to just stick true to his sensibilities when it counted, but recognize, I mean, that's probably the sign of a great talent, to recognize when someone else has got something great to bring to the table that might possibly be better than what you brought to the table.
It's the collaborative side to our business.
Yeah. You've been around the world and back doing documentaries that seem to have an environmental aspect to them. You did Bhopal, A Prayer for Rain, with Martin Sheen. So how did that come about?
Mitchell Barton.
How did did you have this as a pet project and fight for it, or did someone bring you into this project? How did that happen?
Serendipity, which I think fuels so much of what we do in what we hope will be a creative endeavor. My partner, Terry Sweeney, we have a company called Winning Team Productions, and he and I were up in the Bay Area, and we had an opportunity to pitch one of our projects to an investor group. So we were up in like Palo Alto to pitch our projects, and there were other people there too pitching their projects. This was like a little angel group, and as you well know, I will not have to tell you this, money is the fertilizer that creates all projects. And
all movie crops.
All movie crops need watering with money. And so we were there on the quest, and we met this writer-director named Ravi Kumar, who was English but born in India, and he had been pitching his project, and we became, over that short period of time, very friendly with him. We were talking, and he asked if we would look at his project and would we be interested maybe in becoming involved. And in fact, he didn't get the money. We didn't get the money. The investors didn't. I don't know if they gave anybody the money, but we didn't get it. And our relationship with Ravi grew to the point where we ended up signing an agreement with him that we would basically make the film as executive producers. Okay. So Terry Sweeney and myself became the executive producers of the film. And we were able to attach Martin Sheen to play the main American role, which was this guy, Warren Anderson, who was the CEO of Union Carbide. And the film essentially is a love story set against the worst man-made disaster, ecological disaster of all time. Happened in 1984 in Bhopal, India. A Union Carbide pesticide plant leaked cyanide gas, and 9,000 people were killed the first night. Dear. And over the subsequent week, another 5,000 or 6,000 died, and it turned into a nightmare. And subsequently, many hundreds of thousands of people have been adversely affected. Wow. Union Carbide was bought by Dow Chemical and disappeared from the scene, but did pay a significant amount of money in compensation. Most of the money never reached the victims, as I understand it. And Warren Anderson became a fugitive because the Indian government wanted to try him for this horrible accident. Yeah. And in fact, he went into, I shouldn't say, I'm not sure hiding, but he certainly made himself scarce and lived away from the spotlight after that. In fact, ironically, he died a week or two before the film was released, Warren Anderson. So Martin Sheen plays Warren Anderson, and the story is of the disaster, but against the backdrop of a love affair. We filmed in India, in Hyderabad, and with a lot of extremely well-known Indian actors. Part of the film is in a dialect, an Indian dialect. So the film was released here in October, I think it was, September or October last year, and got very, very good reviews. We had some really nice reviews, and it opened in India, and it's opening, I think, in Europe this month. So,
wow, so still quite recent activities on the film.
Took many years to
I've
finish.
heard about this film with you for a long time. I didn't know it was still having releases, you know.
I was in India in 2008. So it's taken 7 years.
Yeah,
to actually emerge.
And when you attach talent like Misha Barton and Martin Sheen, I mean, did you have a list of who you wanted, or do you sort of field out a little breakdown to agents and say, seeking this level and this age group of established actor? How does that work?
Well, Terry had a relationship with Martin Sheen. Okay. And that was the beginning of us being able to bring him to the project.
Got it.
And then the director had always wanted Misha Barton and Kal Penn, I think. And so, as is so often the case with film projects, when one substantial person signs on, then other actors will join.
Right.
Because if they know Martin Sheen is in the film, it's obviously an inducement for them to feel good about joining the film as well.
Absolutely.
So that was really what happened and what so often does happen. That's how we were able to, or partly how we were able to put the cast together. Plus, the material was very strong. And the subject matter, obviously, Martin is a well-known crusader for all kinds of important issues that he feels strongly about. I think he's been arrested like several dozen times.
Wow.
Oh, yeah, Martin. He puts his money where his mouth is, as they say. He goes out and he really does put himself in a position where he will go out and actually support something himself, physically himself. So this was an important issue for him.
So Charlie takes after him, but for slightly different reasons. He gets arrested.
I think Charlie has a different take on life.
Did you get to meet Charlie during the process at all?
Never did.
Did Martin discuss him at all, or did you hear him?
He might have done.
He might have done. Is he a frustrated dad?
He might be.
Well, I guess he's got a wealthy son, so I suppose there's a positive there.
Well, the Sheens, between him and his other son, they have a very glorious acting trio there, I think, and each of them is very talented.
Yeah.
And Martin also happens to be just the nicest person I can describe. I spent a lot of time with him on set in India and became friends with him and was able to talk to him about pretty well anything and everything. And he's an extremely approachable man and also has tremendous generosity and tremendous heart. And I say that in full knowledge of the many things he brought to not just the film, but also to the local community.
Oh, that's
India.
fantastic to hear.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Are you having to attend premieres still for that film in different places in the world?
No, I have not really traveled for the film. It's been mostly the Indian producer and the director doing that. As with all these things, the money was always an issue.
Of course, yeah.
Nobody ever, unless it's Disney or one of the big studios where they have the budget for promotion, which, as you well know, can often be almost as much as the budget was to make the film.
Yeah.
I think, people try and do it in a way that is not conspicuous expenditure.
Right. Is there a place online that people can watch this film now? Is it available?
It's available on Blu-ray.
Okay.
Yeah, it is available on Blu-ray. It's called Bhopal, A Prayer for Rain. And I think it's absolutely worth viewing. And Martin's performance is excellent. It's very exotic because it's set in India. It has a tremendous emotional pull, and the Indian actors in it are just wonderful.
And with distributing the film, you as an executive producer, would this be in your realm of chores to get it, for example, to Netflix and Hulu and Amazon, one of those online outlets? I mean, is that who does that? No,
we didn't. There was a sales company, that represents the film.
Okay.
And mostly it's a function of them, their involvement to get it out as broadly as possible. So, these days, let's be honest, independent films are not having the easiest time of it because the distribution system has, I think, become quite disrupted. There used to be very clearly defined paths along which you could promote and sell an independent film. And I think that's become a little more cloudy in terms of what should be the best way to do it. It used to be, DVDs were a substantial source of income, and that just isn't true anymore. That revenue stream is a lot smaller than it used to be. VOD, video on demand, has not really given the returns that people hoped it would. And piracy is an issue. There's a friend of mine who's a composer who just wrote the music for a Canadian, I think it's a Canadian director, I'm not sure, but anyway, for a film. Was it? Australian film.
Close enough.
Australian
just teasing Canada.
Sorry, Canada, not really. No, not Canada. It was an Australian film. And he just wrote the music for this film, which was released. And the film was pirated so badly that the investors in the next film began to run scared because they could see the effects on the returns on that film.
I mean, yeah, wouldn't it be better to just kind of hustle your film into Netflix pronto rather than have that waiting period where it can go online? And I mean, I bet you it already probably is online if you've had it on a disc.
Yeah, I think the problem is that there is a kind of pipeline, but there's a lot of films waiting for that pipeline.
Okay.
And, you know, most films don't end up on Netflix or whatever. They may end up on a cable channel, it's true to say. But at the end of the day, it's that period when you've got them out on VOD, you know, when people can pay a little something to see them online.
Right.
Or they're going to come out on Blu-ray, that the money is to be earned. But if the film has already been pirated, then it obviously defeats the purpose of putting it on VOD. I mean, I have friends in the business who have sons or daughters who almost boast that they don't pay to see a movie. They never pay to see a movie.
Right. Well, there's a generation that grew up with technology, and they learned how to do this when they were 8 years old, you know, I won't even say it because I don't want to put it out there, but, you know, I think we've all been exposed to people who find this very easy to do. And to some degree, if you've been a kid and you're doing this in your bedroom and everyone at school's doing it, you can see why this would grow up in the culture, because why would you suddenly stop? If you've been getting your content for free since you're a kid, it would be a very hard adjustment. I mean, I personally am a huge fan of Netflix and the online services. And if I could download, you know, an illegal copy, but it was on Netflix, I would still watch it on Netflix because you can pause. It's a nice interface. I mean, I'm just the biggest fan of Netflix. You travel around the world and you log in and here's your shows and you feel at home, you know. I mean, you've got to get it on one of these places.
I know,
Netflix,
but, you know,
Hulu, Amazon.
I think, you know, what we're saying is right, that when you are a child of the internet and you're used to searching and finding resources free, you don't feel as obligated to spend your $12 or whatever to go to the movies to see the film.
No.
And if you don't know what you're missing, I mean, if you don't regularly screen your films on a big screen with a really superb sound system, then you're perhaps willing to watch them on an iPad because they're free. And anything free that doesn't have that value that you haven't paid for, it's much easier to dismiss the product. You know, when I was a younger person, going to the movies was a huge and exciting event. And it was something you did.
Absolutely.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
it was something that you did that was out of the ordinary. It took you into a whole other realm of reality and imagination. Those movie palaces were truly palaces. And that was something that you looked at as a special thing you did.
Sure was, yeah.
Once a
treat.
week, maybe a treat.
A big
real treat. And now I think everything is so available all the time that it's hard to put a value on it. And if you get it free, then you don't feel that. If you're watching it on a small screen and it's not as exciting as it would be on a big screen, you don't feel cheated in the same way.
Well, let's face it, you've got kids growing up now watching movies on iPhones. So they're not going to feel a yearn to see it on a cinema because just watching it on a normal flat screen TV would be great to them because they're watching so much stuff on iPhones.
Yeah, I was saying to a friend of mine a little while ago, he said he can't get his kids to sit and watch a movie with him on TV. You know, they won't sit with him and watch a film. They'll go into their room and watch it on an iPad or an iPhone.
Wow.
Truly. And now, if you've noticed, and this is happening a lot on television, you're being asked to contribute to what you're watching. You know, you've got a website going simultaneously with what you're watching, and you're contributing, or you're making notes, or everybody's sharing comments.
Yeah.
So the focus is on destroying the concentration, taking you out of the film. What we started off saying earlier was about the power of the narrative stream.
Right.
If I make a film, the one thing I am always super conscious of is not doing anything that would take my audience out of the film. I want them to enter the film at the beginning and leave at the end, and to have come on a journey with me throughout that process, never thinking about, oh my gosh, I have to write a check for the mortgage, or boy, my car was playing up when I was on the way to the theater. No, all of that becomes completely removed by the experience that they're having. And I don't think I'm being over melodramatic or emotional about it. I think that's what the best films do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how can you do that if at the same time as you're watching the film, you're also commenting on it?
Right.
It's an odd split brain kind of process to me. And I think personally, and I mean, I'm an older guy, so I would probably say this, but I think it's a tragedy to take away from people the experience of becoming immersed in something that is so all-encompassing that for that 2 hours or hour and a half, you forget your own world and you enter that world.
Yeah.
And I think that's becoming an increasingly difficult experience to share with younger people. I say younger because they are younger, but, you know, people who grew up with the internet and multitask or think they can multitask.
Right.
And it's been shown over and over through actual experimentation that we don't multitask, actually. We don't do it very well. That's the truth. And if you look at the research that's been done, it's very hard for people to truly multitask.
Even women?
No, women multitask all the time, and I wouldn't take that away from them at all. But you know, on a simple level, yes, we can multitask. But when it requires an emotional commitment from us, we don't multitask very well.
Right.
So we're better when we're in an environment where our focus is completely on the issue at hand, and we become part of that experience.
Yeah.
That's why movies were so great, because it wasn't just your experience, it was the experience of the entire audience.
Right.
You all gasped together. You all laughed together.
Yeah.
People actually had a joint experience. And now, right up until the movie starts rolling, people are on their cell phone, people are, you know, looking at the whatever they're looking at on their screens, etc. And there used to be a sense of expectation, right? I mean, you could talk to people. You didn't have a device in your hand.
Yeah. What have you seen lately? Do you always get popcorn?
Does your audience realize you're 70 years old?
Right.
Do they know that? I think they think you're younger, Natalie.
Well, I remember those talkies when they came in. Here's two thoughts I had on what you just said about the films. Is even television now is becoming extremely distracting. I've noticed I love a really good TV series to sink my teeth into, and I like to let a few seasons lapse, and then I have like an extravaganza. So something like The Shield. I think I watched all seasons of The Shield in about 6 weeks. You know, it was fantastic. But what the networks are doing now is they put these bumpers, these lower thirds, with commercials and text for the next TV show. And this I find quite bothersome, I'll be honest with you. It's like if I'm watching Walter White about to shoot somebody, I don't want to see a little blurb for the next TV show coming up, you know. Even those little logos now. You know, in Breaking Bad, the AMC logo for a while was in bright, fully opaque yellow. I mean, I'm sure it's now, you know, well, it's not on now, but I think they toned it down and lowered the opacity. But for a while, it was like, I'm so distracted with this logo in the corner of the screen. So even TV now, you can't fully immerse. It's got so many distractions with it.
That's the problem with news, isn't it? I don't know if anybody has done the study, but how much do you think our ability to absorb news is affected by the fact that they run on the bottom of the screen during the news report multiple other reports simultaneous? And it's distracting, and it's also off the subject. In other words, you know, you could be reading about a shooting in, I don't know, Virginia, while they're talking about the price of butter in Vietnam.
Right.
And these two subjects could be so opposed to each other, and yet you are subliminally reading what's going on at the bottom of the screen, and at the same time taking in what's happening in the main newscast. And I'm not sure whether or not that has contributed to some extent to the way now people even consider voting and consider politics and consider what's important to them in terms of what needs to be understood and changed, or because it all seems to just be like a bazaar and you have it all laid out in front of you and you choose the bit you want. I'll take that bangle. Well, do you want to match it with the bracelet because they match? No, I won't take the matching bracelet. I'd rather take the turban, because that just catches my eye right now. And so there's a kind of feeling that you mix and match whatever it is you want to mix and match. There's no consistency in a way where everything means something that is important to you because you have the choice at any moment. I mean, I switch back and forth between 2 channels or 3 channels, partly because of commercials, of course, which is what everybody does. So, you end up realizing that your train of thought is constantly being interrupted.
Yes, it is.
And while you and I have come from a tradition where that didn't used to be the case. I mean, I grew up, when I first got television, they had 2 channels. That was it. And they stopped broadcasting at midnight. That was it. And they didn't start broadcasting until 8 o'clock in the morning. That was it. That's all you had. I listened to the radio. I mean, I remember all my favorite shows were on the radio when I was a child. So none of that was a problem. There was no competing attractions that were all happening simultaneously and you could have a piece of anytime you want.
Right.
And I don't know. I mean, I think on the one level it may be great because certainly nobody needs a set of encyclopedias on their shelf anymore. Everything is available. It's at your fingertips, which is remarkable. I used to write scripts and half the time was spent finding the right book to find the information I needed to write the script. Now I can go online and all the information I could possibly want is available.
Right. Well, you mentioned about train of thought, and they've done studies that show that because of these constant interruptions, that it's actually changing the way our brains are working, and that we're getting accustomed now to not being able to concentrate, and it's a problem. And they said that if you're doing something, let's say you're writing, and you're trying to do something that's taking your focus, and an email comes in, and you go to look at the email, they said it takes your brain about 25 minutes to regroup to that same level of focus that you had attained before you had the little distraction of checking your phone, answering your phone, looking at a text, an email. So it is changing literally the way that we're doing things with our brains.
And it must add to people's impatience and their inability to spend more than a few minutes focusing on something. It must do. There must be an effect like that from what you're saying. Because if you're constantly being interrupted, your train of thought or something else is beckoning for your attention, and it's taking you that long to readjust, then there are huge parts of the time that you're not focused on either. You're kind of in a middle zone.
That's right. A useless limbo.
Right, a useless limbo.
Between technology.
And that to me, I had always thought of myself as being first and foremost a storyteller, which is what film is, and it does it probably better than any other medium ever invented. Radio, I was in radio drama. I started my career in the BBC in radio, and I did radio drama. And that is a remarkably pure medium. Because when you're listening to a radio drama, everything's happening in your head. So whatever the costume is in your head.
Yeah.
I would sit with actors and do, let's say, a play based on a Dickens book, so a 19th century story. And here were these actors in their jeans and their T-shirts and, unshaven with a cigarette here and a cup of tea there and a beer there. And they would be Martin Chuzzlewit or they would be Oliver Twist. And I always remember one thing that happened to me, and I wish I could remember the actor's name, but I can't. But he was a consummate radio actor and actor altogether overall. But we were recording a sequence from a play, and it was based on a Dickens book. And I was in the booth, and he started doing this, and everybody's chatting away in the booth, And bit by bit, everybody stopped talking because he was doing this extraordinary interpretation of this character who was speaking, and it just became a riveting experience.
Right.
And here he is sitting there, literally he was, with the jeans and the T-shirt, unshaven, playing this role on radio. And it was so commanding that it demanded your attention. And I will always remember that. And at the end, everybody applauded. We were recording it, obviously it wasn't live, you know, I did work on live drama, but this was recorded. But everybody applauded. And he looked around like he had been in the world of Dickens. He had not been in this world of the studio. And I'll always remember that. It was just the most amazing experience. I'm in the back of the booth and I'm seeing people bit by bit, they get drawn out of what they're doing into this singular experience of an actor producing something that was so wonderfully, it moved you into another space.
Yeah. And was your role directing?
I was a stage, what do they call it? Sound supervisor.
Okay.
Like a, what do they call it? Sound manager? No.
Sound engineer?
No, studio manager.
Okay.
Yeah, I trained as a studio manager because it was the only available job at the BBC when I joined, and you had to get whatever you could. Getting in was a nightmare anyway. It was extremely difficult. It took 9 months and 3 interviews. It was very harrowing, and that was the only job on offer. But the idea was that you would join the BBC no matter where you could, and then once you were in, you could then apply for jobs internally rather than from the externally, and it gave you an advantage, obviously.
Yeah.
And you would do what the BBC called attachments, which meant like I was attached for 6 months to television from radio. Radio continued to pay my salary, but I got to work for 6 months in television. And the idea of that was, I think it's brilliant, and I think it's a really classic BBC apprenticeship approach, as it used to be. Everything's changed now. But what it meant was that when a job came up in television, you had experience.
Yeah.
So
it's super smart.
Exactly. So I did like 2 or maybe 3 attachments in a row.
Yeah.
I kept getting asked back. So I would go back. And then when a permanent job came up, I was poised to get that job. So I ended up transferring out of radio into where I really wanted to be, which was television.
And what were you doing in TV?
I started off on Are You Being Served?
Oh.
I was the floor manager on Are You Being Served?
Oh,
they called
how
them,
much fun.
Unbelievable. It was like joining a club because they all knew each other so well and they were so close that you were like an outsider.
Wow.
But it was a great, way to cut your teeth.
Now, when you went into that show, how many years had it been on the air?
Oh my gosh. Well, I must have gone in like 1973 or something. Would it have been 73 and 72? So it had probably been on the air by that time for 15 years or something. I don't know. I think it started in the 60s. I did 3 great shows. I did Are You Being Served? I did the 2 Ronnies.
Oh, wow.
And I did the Morecambe and Wise. I did the Christmas show of Morecambe and Wise.
Oh, my gosh.
And if anybody listening knows who Morecambe and Wise were, I mean, legendary, of course, British comedians. Well, I got to know them quite well. And I was taking my mother on a visit to Television Centre, which, of course, everybody craved. Like, once I started working for the BBC television, everybody would ask me, can I come and visit, and will you take me around and show me the Television Centre? So my mother was my guest, and I'm walking across, it's a huge atrium, BBC Television Centre. It's a round building, and there's a huge, open area in the middle. And I was walking across, and I was doing the Morecambe and Wise Christmas show, and so my mother was going to attend the rehearsals, because that was open to guests. If you were on the show, you could invite guests to the rehearsal.
Wow.
Which was funnier than the show.
Yeah.
Of course, much funnier than the show. So my mum was there to see the rehearsals. So I'm walking across and here is coming Eric Morecambe towards me. And he was the tall one with the glasses, right?
Yeah.
The really funny one. He's coming in, he says, hello, Lesh. I said, hello, Eric. He said, is this your mum? And I said, yes. He said, hello, mum. So my mother's speechless. speechless. They were the biggest comedian show on the air
They were,
of the time, right? And my mother is speechless. Her mouth is open. And Eric says, "You all right, love?" And she nods. And he did a little dance like this, and presented himself to her as if to say, "That's for you." And he said, "Enjoy the show, love, won't you?" I said, "See you later, Lesh." And off he goes.
Such a class act.
Such a class act. And my mother turned to me and she said, that was Eric Morecambe. And I said, yeah. She said, "He spoke to me." And I said, "Yes." "No," she said, "he spoke to me."
That's
said, "Yeah,
lovely.
Mum, he did." And she never forgot it. Of course she never forgot it. You know, all her friends knew. I mean, when I went home the next time, they're all going, "Oh, your mum was talking about she met Eric Morecambe." And I said, "Yes, she did." And they went, "I mean, she really did? She met him?" I said, "Oh, yeah, he said hello to her and did a little dance for her." And they went, "Oh, can you take me?"
I don't think in America people really know who any of these people are, Morecambe and Wise. It was so insular.
The two Ronnies.
So insular to the UK.
Yeah,
and yet American comedy came over to us, but it didn't really go both ways, except I guess for Monty Python.
I worked with a number of comedians because being as I joined television on that side of TV. I ended up very happily and very luckily being brought into what they called plays department, which was the single films. So they were films. That's how come I came to work with Stephen Frears.
Okay.
But I was kind of taken out of series. In fact, it was serials. Serials. They had 3 elements to drama department, and one of them was the comedy. And I started in comedy, in the comedy division. And that's how come I worked on these shows like Are You Being Served and The Two Ronnies. And I met like Trevor Howard, who was a very famous British comedian. Oh, that was so funny. A lot of stories about Trevor Howard. And then I ended up being asked for on the drama side by Simon Channing Williams. Simon became the producer of Mike Leigh's films, like Secrets and Lies. Simon became his producer, and Simon was became a good friend of mine. What happened was that I was called up to the head of drama department, into his office. It was very bureaucratic, the BBC, despite the fact of it being such an artistic organisation. I'm called up into his office, and Trevor Noakes, his name was Trevor Noakes, and Trevor said to me, "Well, Leszek," he said, "you're going to go into plays department." I said, "I am." I'd only been there for like a year and a half or something, which was unheard of because everybody wanted to go to plays because it's where they did the films, you know, and it was the more so-called glamorous part of the whole thing.
Plays, right? As in plays, stage
but
plays?
But they weren't. They were films.
Oh, okay. But
just
they called them
BBC
plays.
Quirk, yeah.
I see.
BBC quirkiness.
Okay.
So weird. The BBC did that all the time, you know. They had names for things that had nothing to do with reality. It came from the 30s when the BBC started.
I see.
Right? So
very traditional organisation.
Very traditional. So what happened was that I ended up, Trevor said, "So you're going to do this film, you're going to come into plays department." I said, "How come, Trevor? Like, I never asked for it, and you know everybody wants to go into plays department." And he said, "Well, you've been requested." And I said, "Who requested me?" He said, "Simon Channing Williams." So when I got on the film with Stephen, Steinman was my immediate boss. He was like the first AD, I was the second AD or whatever. So, of course, I said to Simon, "Well, Simon, how come you got me onto this film? Like, you know, I'd never met him before, Simon." And he said, "Well, Leshy," he called me Leshy. "Well, Leshy," he said, "I saw you around the department and you looked like jolly good fun." And I said, "Really?" He said, "Yes." I thought, he's going to be fun to work with.
Oh, that's
We've got
hilarious.
to get that chappie onto our next film. I'm serious. Simon was very funny. And I said, "Well, that was wonderful, Simon." He said, "No, I just wanted you here so you'd make me laugh."
No pressure.
That's right. But we then did like 3 films together.
Wow.
And the other person who joined us, the second film we did together, I brought in somebody that time, and it was the son of, do you remember Jack Hawkins, the great actor, the British actor? Oh. At one point, Jack Hawkins was the leading British actor in the world.
I mean,
he was in all the big movies. You'd know him if you saw him.
Yeah.
He had a very famous voice, gravelly, deep, wonderful resonant voice.
I mean, I am a hair younger than you.
Yeah, you are.
Just a hair.
Yes, you are.
But Jack Hawkins...
Despite my earlier jibe. But no, he was a phenomenal actor. And Nick Hawkins was his son.
Okay.
And so I brought Nick into the team. So Nick Hawkins joined us. And Jack sadly died of a hemorrhage to do with an operation he had. He lost his vocal cords.
Oh, dear.
And Charles Gray, another actor I worked with, thereby hangs another stream of tales. But Charles would voice Jack Hawkins' roles.
Oh, okay.
In the end.
Do the ADR for him.
He did, because Jack lost his voice. And he had one of the great voices in all drama.
Wow.
I mean, Jack Hawkins' voice was fantastic.
Did you ever cross paths with any of the Monty Python gang?
I did. I worked with Michael Palin.
Okay.
Yes, I did. I did a film which Stephen directed called Three Men in a Boat, which is a very famous Victorian novel about three men who go on the river with their dog Montmorency. And it's funny as heck, actually. It's a great novel. And it was written in Victorian days.
Okay.
And I had, what was his name? The guy who was in Rocky Horror Show, who played the main character. Anyway, him, Michael Palin, and then there was a third actor. So that was the cast. And we went off down the river for 6 weeks, filming this charming period story of three men in a boat with their dog Montmorency.
And what was Michael Palin like to work with?
Yeah, lovely man. I have a funny story about Michael. I worked with Michael, and we were together for 6 weeks, and got on really well. He was a great guy. And years and years and years later, I had a film at the Cannes Film Festival, and I was there in Cannes, and I was in the Carlton Hotel. It's a famous hotel where a lot of famous people stay during the festival. I wasn't staying there, I hasten to say, but I was in the Carlton Hotel, and I was getting into an elevator. And the doors open, and there was Michael Palin in the elevator. Now, this is many years since I worked with him. And he looked at me and he said, "Hello, Lesh, how are you?" And I said, "You remember me, Michael?" He said, "I'll never forget you. 6 weeks on the river."
Yeah, well, that is
and
pretty
I said,
considerable.
Yeah, and I was so flattered that Michael Palin would remember me, but that was typical. He really cared about people, and he was very warm and very approachable. And I eventually met Eric Idle as well. And Eric Idle also very, very nice and extremely approachable. So, yeah, it's kind of like, I guess you can't kind of be around the English scene without meeting somebody from Monty Python.
No, that's right. And it's fascinating that you were around the comedy. Now, this sounds like possibly the era before Ab Fab.
Yeah.
Yes.
I left the BBC in 1978. So I had 5 or 6 years, and then I started my own company and left the BBC.
And when did you come to America?
85.
85.
Yeah, I've been here 30 years. It
Yeah,
doesn't
it's a
seem
long
possible because I look
time.
so young.
You
People
do.
say all the time, "How can you have been here 30 years?"
Well, I don't know how old you are.
No, of
but you
course
look the
not,
same
no.
as when I saw you
Yes.
years ago.
Yes.
You look the same. And you know what? You look a real fun chappy to work with.
Oh, thank you, Natalie. Now maybe an opportunity will come along. That would be nice.
Yeah, well, we've talked about that, haven't we? Doing
we've
opportunities.
tried. Well, we still should do it.
Yeah.
We're stupid.
We didn't try very hard. We just
Well,
had a nice coffee at the King's Road,
it's
I
your
believe. And we talked...
I'm going to blame it all on you.
Well, it probably is all my fault.
No, not
I had the
really.
idea and you were going to direct it.
No, we
but
were
I've
gonna
got to
make
write
it.
the thing. So,
It was good.
yeah, well,
was a
I've still
good
got
idea.
copious notes on it.
Okay.
So we could.
The moment will come, won't it?
It was stemming from us again and our little connection from, I think, even our childhoods of both having kind of rocky childhoods
Yeah,
with our dads.
that's true.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Dads.
Well, you had a very colourful childhood.
I guess my dad was really young when my parents had me, and he was in a band. He was a musician, and he was, had me when he was 21. So in the heyday of drinking man's times in England and being a musician. So, how could he possibly know how to be a parent? So
They did their best.
Yeah.
Our parents did their best. I mean, my father was older. My parents were quite old because they'd both been married before. But my father had lost his wife and child and could never find them again. because he was married in Romania before the war, before the Second World War. And so he had to have the marriage annulled in order to marry my mother.
How terrible to have these two people in his life that he loved.
I have a half-sister in Romania.
That you'll never know about.
Never. I'll never find her.
Goodness me. Imagine every night he went to bed, he must have had a little thought in his heart for
Really?
them.
You think about it. It was a terrible thing.
Yeah.
And then my mother was married before, and I have a half-brother.
And why was your dad, what was the difficulty? Was he a bit of a shouter?
My dad was a very, I think, frustrated man. I think, he had talents and he couldn't realize them. He also had a very, very tough upbringing. His father was brutal, was a brutal man.
Yeah.
And also, I think, a drinker.
And so it goes around.
Around. My dad did not beat us and didn't ever hit me. He hit me once, apparently when I was a little kid, and his hand mark was on my backside, and he was so absolutely horrified at what he'd done, he never touched me or my sister again. So he was not anybody who would ever lash out or hit, But he would shout, and he had a really volcanic temper.
Yeah.
So that was, part of it, I think. It's like one of those weird things. I know how much he cared, and 3 weeks before he died, he called me, because what happened was, on my 21st birthday, I actually punched my father, and I knocked him down. And it was more his surprise than the force of my punch. He was so surprised I would hit him. But he had done something and said something about my then girlfriend, which was very upsetting, and so that was why it happened.
Right.
And it was a long time in coming,
I bet.
I was 21 and
Yeah.
I just wouldn't put up with it anymore.
Right.
I then didn't speak to him for 2 years. And in the end, my mum was the one who said, look, your father is truly suffering because you're not in contact with him, you won't talk to him, and his pride just won't let him come to you. You have to come to him, and I did. So we reconciled, and then 3 weeks before he died, and this was not a long time after we had reconciled, he called me up out of the blue, and he asked me if I would meet him in London in a pub. And we met in a pub, most unusual for him to do that. We were sitting drinking, and he basically said to me that he had been too hard on me. He said, I've been too hard on you. And he said, I forced you in a way because I was afraid that you wouldn't be able to overcome your background and that you wouldn't become what you could become. And it was fear. That's why I forced you. And I want to tell you that I'm truly sorry that I did that. I did it that way. And so what happened was 3 weeks later, he dropped dead of a heart attack. Dropped dead. So we're at the funeral, and he was only 62 when he died. And we're at the funeral, and my sister and I are there, and I say to her, you know what happened? I said, Dad called me up, and blah, blah, and she said, he did the same to me. I said, no, I don't believe it. So somewhere inside he knew.
You got to get something off his conscience, for sure.
Yeah, he basically said, he said to me, I feel, you're in a great career. Everything is going to be fine for you. I've done everything I can do. I have nothing left to do. And then he died.
He might have had some twinges in his chest and thought, oh, it's coming. I better make my peace.
Yeah.
Which is great that he did that. And at least you can feel. Yeah. I mean, my dad has apologized to me, and I truthfully, fully, completely forgive, because most of us in that generation, in England especially, my goodness, I mean, they all had rough childhoods, I mean, it's a hard life. It's still a hard life now for a lot of people everywhere in the world. But our parents had hard lives. And so I look at what my parents went through and think, well, how could they have known any better?
Yeah. And I think when you're very young, I was afraid of my father. I was afraid of him. I wasn't afraid he would hit me, and I wasn't afraid of him physically, but I was afraid of the power of his domination.
Right.
And my sister was the rebellious one. She rebelled. I didn't rebel. I used to say to her, because he used to work 12-hour shifts, and half the time they were night shifts. And I used to say to her, wait till he goes to work and then we can do whatever we want. But my sister wouldn't. She'd say to him, well, I'm going to go out tonight. And he would say, you're not going out. You're not going out tonight. You're going to stay at home. You're going to do your homework, and you're not going to go out. And she would say, yes, I am. And I would say to her, why do you confront him with it? Wait till he goes to work and then go out. And she said, no, I'm not going to lie. I'm going to tell him the truth.
Right.
And that was my sister. She was totally different. Me, I was much more inclined to say, yes, Dad, that's fine. And then I'd go out with my friends.
Right.
And what did he know?
Yeah, that's right.
But the truth is, it made of my sister a different kind of, it creates a different kind of scar, because you're constantly dealing with that domination. He was a very dominating character, but charming, extremely charming and generous. My school blazer, which I had to have for school, he couldn't afford to buy. He was a factory worker. He couldn't afford to buy. And so he would buy over 3 years. So they would buy a really big blazer, and my mother would take it in, to make it fit me, and bit by bit let it out. Mm. And yet, when he finally got a little extra money at work or whatever, and he bought himself a nice pair of shoes, and he hadn't bought a pair of shoes in probably 4 years or 5 years. And I was at home, and I think my mother said to me, oh, your dad bought a really nice pair of shoes. Show Leszek, show Leszek, Greg. So he goes to a closet and he brings out the pair of shoes and he says, here, they're yours. And I said, no, Dad, I don't need shoes. It's fine. He went, no, they're yours. You take them, they're yours. Ah. And he would do that. Yeah. He would give me things that he had not been able to afford to buy for himself. But when he bought them, he'd give them to me.
Yeah.
I'm serious. And I said to him, I don't need your shoes. In fact, by year 2 of the BBC, I was earning more than my father. Mm. And he was working 12-hour shifts in a factory. Wow. And I was having a heck of a good time.
Yeah.
I was having a heck of a good time.
Yeah.
And I was earning more than my dad.
Wow.
And my dad was trying to give me things.
Aww.
And I didn't have it in my heart to say to him, Dad, I'm earning more than you.
Right.
I don't need it.
Right.
I can afford this, right?
Yeah.
But I couldn't say it to him because I thought I would hurt him.
Well, you would hurt his pride. Right. That's his manliness, giving and providing for his son, and you would have taken it away. So it's good that you didn't.
Yes, and I felt that. And so I took certain gifts that I didn't need, but I did it because I knew if I had said to him, well, Dad, I'm earning more than you.
Yeah.
I don't need this. It would have been a tragedy,
Yeah.
But after he died, I went up to the factory where he worked, and I was asked, I went to the pay office they gave my mother money because he died and everything. So I went to get the money, and they said, oh, the manager wants to see you. And I said, really? And they said, yeah, he really wants to see you. So I go up, and this is the guy who's in charge of the factory. And he said, oh, I've always wanted to meet you. He said, you have to explain something to me. I said, what? He said, your dad was here for like 26 years or whatever, and he would never accept a promotion. He said he was offered all kinds of promotions, and he would always turn them down. He said he could have been a senior manager. Your dad was smart, and he said he got on well with everybody. Everybody liked him, but he wouldn't accept the promotions.
Grief.
And he said, do you know why? Because he said, I know your family was struggling.
Yeah.
So, years later, a year ago, 2 years ago, I'm with some friends, and I'm introduced to this woman who is a clairvoyant, she tells me. So we start talking, and she asks me about my background, etc. And this story comes up, She said, wait a minute. She said, let me go inside for a moment. And then she said to me, well, you know why your father turned down all of those promotions? And I said, no. She said, well, because he didn't want to be in charge of men.
Oh.
He had been in charge of men, and some of them were killed.
Oh.
And he never wanted that responsibility again.
Mm.
And
Fair
I said,
enough.
Yes. I said, you know what? That makes as much sense as anything.
Yeah, it does.
He just didn't want the responsibility.
Yeah.
He wanted to take the orders, not give them. And he always said to me that there were things he would tell me, but he never did. He died too soon. And knowing the little bits I've been able to put together, clearly he had been involved in probably incidents, happenings things that did mean life and death. And he may well have had to make decisions that governed life and death.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Well, thank goodness that he did tell you those key things 3 weeks before he passed away, that, you know, what important stuff to share with you.
It meant a lot. Yeah. Alcohol is responsible for so much horror. I mean, drugs are awful, but people tend to discount alcohol because it's a social interaction drug. But I have seen so much harm come from drunken people.
Oh, absolutely.
Alcohol, people out of control, people doing things that if you told them the next day, they wouldn't believe you. They don't have memory of it even.
Yeah, well, it's the temperament changes.
Yes.
Some people who just can't handle their drink, the bad drunk. It's awful. And I mean, to be the kids of people like this, it's not good.
My dad was never drunk until later in life, and then he stopped being able to hold his liquor. My dad was an extraordinary drinker. He could drink a tremendous amount with no visible signs. And I inherited that, actually. You know, in my earlier days, at the BBC, people made jokes about making me drunk, you know, and I don't think anybody ever succeeded. Maybe Simon Channing Williams was a bigger drinker than me. He was a remarkable drinker. But that was the time. Back then, everybody at the BBC drank. It was the way. It was the social intercourse. It was the norm. And I had grown up to be a very handy drinker. But my dad in later life, you know, succumbed. And then he would go into rages fueled by alcohol, which he wasn't used to because it hadn't happened before. And so that was really kind of a sad... For me, it was later in life rather than earlier, hence the fight on my 21st birthday.
Right.
It would never have happened except he'd been drinking.
Right.
He'd been drinking to celebrate my birthday. But he got out of control because of it. He said things he would never have said otherwise. So there's an example of drink. And had that happened, 10 years previously, he would have drunk the same amount. He wouldn't have been drunk. But he had diabetes by that point, and it affected him really, really badly. And so, I did see towards the end of his life, I saw a change. Not every day, but if he got his hands on alcohol. One of the saving graces was he didn't have enough money to drink.
Right.
And he wasn't so bad that he would spend money on drink rather than on us or my mother.
Yeah, that was a saving grace.
That was a saving grace.
That's one plus, I guess, of in England, because it's cheaper in America to buy booze.
Yes. Yeah, booze was expensive
Yeah,
there.
and it still is. A lot of it still is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you said sad. I mean, the word sad, I think it's tragic what alcohol does to so many families and to so many relationships and to the formation of children and their psyches and their self-esteem.
I think, unlike almost anything else, alcohol changes the personality of a person.
Right.
And somebody who has been giving and warm and loving suddenly becomes vicious and nasty and paranoid, and you can't reason with them. You can't talk them down.
No.
They won't be talked down.
No, that's right.
And the more you challenge them, the nastier they become. And I think that's the thing about alcohol that I've seen. And I've seen people do crazy things when they're drunk because, it was the culture in which I grew up in the BBC. I mean, every BBC building had a club. It was a private club. And if you had a BBC ID card, you could get into the club, and the alcohol was subsidized. You could go in there and everybody at the end of the day would be in the club. You'd see the most remarkable people in there. I saw Elton John. It was so funny. I always remember somebody coming rushing into the room I was working in. I don't remember what I was doing. And they said, "You've got to come to the club. You've got to come to the club." I said, "Why?" They said, "There's this guy in there. He's unbelievable. He's incredible. His name is Elton John." And I said, "Really?" And they said, "Yeah, he's like a musician or something." And they said, "He's got all these like sparkling things. His boots have heels that are like 6 inches wide. And oh my goodness, you've got to come." So I go to the club and there is Elton John, but it was in his, like whatever he was then.
Yeah.
I don't remember what he was then, but silver hair. And he's holding court with all these people around him and everybody's drinking. And I spent the evening in the club with Elton John in what were then his relatively early days.
Yeah. Do you remember anything of what he was holding court about?
I just think he was very drunk. That's what I remember. I remember it was so funny. It was so many, things like that you would have the opportunity to meet people that you'd never met before, and it still goes on. I guess that's one of the privileges of our business to some extent. You bump into really interesting people sometimes.
Well, you always have a backstage pass.
Yes.
Because you're in the business.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of true. And I guess it's something that you don't much think about because it's part and parcel of what you need to do in order to do what you do.
Yeah.
I guess that's true.
So what's next for you?
Well, I just finished a film in New Zealand, actually a feature film, but a short feature film. And it's the story of 3 generations of a South Island family. And the film is finished, and I had the great good fortune to work with the composer who worked on the documentary I did last year in the South Pacific. And he actually is a New Zealander himself. And we had the Christchurch Symphony Orchestra. So he was able to write a full orchestral score. And we shot the film in 48 frames, 6K, using the same camera as Peter Jackson used for The Hobbit.
Are these big red cameras?
The red.
The custom
it's
reds.
the red dragon, Emperor or something. The red dragon, I think it's called. And we had 2 of them. And these are remarkable cameras. And we shot at 48 frames because this thing is going to be projected in a cinema. And the film had no words.
Oh.
Actors, but no words. So I had to make the film. I had to create a story within the film, but without any dialogue.
And this
just
is
music and vision.
Is this the one, Living Life Forwards?
No, this is Flying South.
Flying South.
This one's called Flying South. The documentary was Living Life Forwards. And that was the one that I shot in the South Pacific, including in New Zealand.
Okay.
And that, ironically, kind of contributed to me getting the New Zealand film as director. One of the people I worked with is an old friend from New Zealand, and he's a producer, and he helped me on the documentary, and he was setting up this other film, and he asked me if I could recommend a composer. Did I know any? And I recommended Mark, who is Mark Cyprian Smythe, who's a Kiwi composer. I thought they would like that. And he had written the music for the South Pacific documentary, Living Life Forwards, and that's an hour long. He'd done a great job for me. I thought he was super talented. And they loved what he turned in as a sample for them. And then they said, well, you know what? Would you like to direct the film? So out of doing a good turn for Mark out of shooting in New Zealand with the documentary, I got offered the opportunity to direct the film. So I spent nearly 3 months in New Zealand last year, right before Christmas, making this film.
So somebody else thought you'd be fun to work with.
People always think I'm fun to work with.
Well, look at you.
They may not think I'm talented, but they think I'm fun.
But you look fun to work with.
Probably because I'm smiling all the time.
But you've got that just kind of, it's like if Santa shaved.
Right.
I mean,
that would be it, right?
Yeah, you're that
Santa
friendly.
without a beard.
You totally are like Santa. Young Santa.
Oh,
young Santa
Glad you
without
threw
a
that
beard.
in.
Yes.
I was going to hold that against you forever.
I know. I could tell by the...
But I actually used to have a beard. I had a beard and moustache. Not a big one. I never had a big beard, just a little one. But to me, it's like, life is hard enough. Why make it harder?
Yeah.
If I don't have fun, when I stop having fun making films, I will stop making films. This was harrowing, making the film in New Zealand. It was extremely challenging. But you're making a film.
Yeah.
I'm not creating, a homeless shelter, or I'm not dealing with people who don't have any legs, or I'm not fighting in Iraq. I'm making a film.
Right.
And if you put it into context, then what you're doing is making something that, I believe is important. I really think making films is important. I do not diminish at all how important it is to give people escapist entertainment, to transport people into another place, another time. That is really important. We, the storytellers, have always had a pride of place in the tribe. The storyteller was always the person that everybody sat down and waited for and listened to and talked about after they were gone. and talked about their stories. So they were always important people, very central people. The minstrel, the wandering minstrel who sang the songs, was the person when he came to your town. Everybody went to the town square to hear him. Everybody said, the minstrel's here. Everybody went. So what we do is very important, but it's not about saving lives or creating opportunities for people who don't have any.
Right. We're not doctors.
Exactly. And, you know, when I made a film years ago and I said to the DP something or other, and he said, well, you know, Lesh, it is brain surgery. And that's true. If you look at the complexity of making a film, it is brain surgery. I don't think I'm any less smart or aware or talented or competent than a brain surgeon. We just do different things.
Yeah, of course.
Right? It is brain surgery. It's very complicated to make a film. However, at the end of the day, you're making a film. And that's something that whenever things are difficult on the film set or the producer is difficult to deal with and actors are nightmares. Oh, Natalie, if you only knew. Actors are nightmares. So when you get through all their problems, which you now take on your shoulders, you take on their emotional baggage when you're directing actors. Always, always, always.
You're going to have to give an example now. You don't have to mention names, but we've got to have an example.
There was a very famous actor whose name I won't tell you. I sat all night with him in a bar once while he poured his heart out to me about what was happening to him at home and what was happening with his girlfriend and what was happening with his wife. And it was. And this is not the only time. You know, I would say on multiple occasions sat with people or helped people through something that was important in their lives that was going on at home, that if they didn't clear it out of their purview would be a block to what they were doing on the set. I mean, I'm no psychiatrist, but in order to direct anybody in a performance, I think understanding a little bit, at least, about human psychology is really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you learn it over the years.
Yeah.
So, you know, I do believe that.
Right.
I've always thought, Day for Night, the Truffaut, the film Day for Night, the French film? Oh, okay, look at that. Day for Night.
Haven't seen Day for Night.
Oh, you've got to see it.
Okay.
It's brilliant.
I will.
It's brilliant.
Okay.
And what it shows is, so well, if you've ever been on a film set, it shows what life on a film set's like.
Okay.
How the interplay of emotion. And somebody once said something very interesting to me. You probably have experienced this. When you make a film, everybody on the set becomes extremely close.
Like a play. It's like a play.
Extremely close, right.
Yeah.
Very friendly, almost to the point where you feel like you've known them forever.
Yeah.
And then when it breaks up, there's scenes of great emotion when people part and they really, feel like they'll not be able to live without each other and they'll always stay in contact. And of course, the inevitable happens. They don't stay in contact. And occasionally, like you and I did. And of course, that happens. And I have friends that I've stayed in contact with, of course. But for the most part, you don't. And somebody once said to me, and I think this is very insightful, they said the reason for it is because when you make a film, you see actors, you see these people playing characters, go through every level of emotion that you would normally see them go through in 25 years of knowing them.
Right.
It's all compressed into a few weeks. You see them upset, you see them happy, you see them crying. You see all of these things that they are not pretending to do, they are being that.
Right.
So they're using themselves and their own inner workings to create that character. Therefore, you feel like you really know them well because you've seen them go through all of these different emotional stages. And I think that is the closest I've ever heard to a rational explanation for why you feel that way.
I think that sounds excellent. And I also have another theory to throw in the hat, is that it's a similar way. I used to be married to a military pilot. And he told me that the way that they forge the military and bond these guys together, it's about shared hardships. And that's why they have these drills with shouting at them and insulting them and abusing them so that squadron or whatever it is, they bond. and they truly have to be willing to die for each other in order to be effective. And I think when you're working on a film, there's a shared hardship of circumstance. There's just an unusual circumstance that's not normal. You're getting up at funny times, going to bed at funny times. You've got strange ways you're eating your food out of little trucks and stuff. So this is little hardships and unusual circumstances that you're sharing. And I think there's a psychological thing that happens there. Even if two people get into an elevator and it gets stuck for a minute, there's a bonding that will take place because you've just gone through a shared experience that's unusual.
Well, and also I think, I was talking to somebody about this the other night, I think it's the White House syndrome. When you are working on something that for the period of time that you're working on it is so important and central to your life, you are there to create a product. It has to be finished in a certain time for a certain amount of money. It has to be done in such a way that it can be successfully completed. It's of the moment, every moment you are contributing to completing this. It's like being in the White House. It puts you into a feeling of doing something special. You're doing something special. You're not part of the real world. Right. You have another agenda that is separate from... You hear people say this all the time. When you leave the set and you go home and you have to deal with the laundry, it's awful because you've just spent 3 months in a hotel where you never had to deal with the laundry. You never had to deal with, the everyday problems of getting places. Somebody turns up in the morning and picks you up and takes you, sits you in a makeup chair, makes you up, costumes you, puts you on the set. All of those things contribute to you feeling that you're in a contribute. I just hit the microphone. That is a problem I have sometimes.
It was very adorable, though.
It was a large gesture. Normally I hit somebody in the face, so think yourself lucky it's just a microphone. So what happened is that then people just feel that they've been in this rarefied, special, separate environment.
Yeah, which they have.
Which they have. In London, a couple of times, believe this or not, I was late to get to the set or whatever. I went through red lights. I went through 2 sets of red lights once, early in the morning, and a police car appeared behind me with the lights going. He pulls me over. I say, "Officer, I'm really sorry." I said, "I am late for the set. We're making a film like 5 miles down the road. I'm late." And he said, "You're late?" And I said, "Hold on, pal." He said, "I'll go in front of you and put my lights on, all right?" He said, "And we'll just go straight through." I said, "Well, thank you very much." And here I am with a police escort, and the guy's got his lights going like red and blue, and we're going through all the red traffic lights.
Right.
And he gets me to the set, and I said, "Well, I hope you'll stay and have breakfast." And he said, "Oh, yeah, that would be nice." I said, "This is the crew." He said, "Oh, you're making a film?" "Oh, yeah, I'd love to, right?" So he stayed and had breakfast.
Yeah, because it's special. I mean, that's, again, taking us back to what we were talking about when movies were special, and they still are, but there's something that's not quite the same now about the films.
I think, people are not maybe as impressed as perhaps they once were, about these things. I'm not sure, but...
I wanted to add something when I thought it was really interesting what your colleague had said to you about the brain surgery, because it made me almost see there's another second level there. Because when we're watching films and television and great entertainment, we are escaping. And I mean, all the health studies have shown laughter, for example, changes the chemistry in your body so much. I mean, it's helpful for your heart, laughing. It's oxygenating your blood. It's reducing stress. So there's a level of brain surgery when somebody's watching a great film and they're able to fully immerse. It is actually helping your brain, because it's allowing your brain that immersion time for 90 minutes or 2 hours to reconnect in ways that we can't in current technology-filled time that we're living in.
Natalie, I feel like I'm on the set of Grey's Anatomy. It's a remarkable observation. If only we had a cadaver here, you could show me what you could really do.
We better end while we're on a high note, Leszek.
Before we get to that, yeah, probably right.
Well, it's really been just such a pleasure to catch up with you, and just a delight, as it always is when I get to spend time with you. It is a delight, and no wonder that man at the BBC spotted you from a mile away and said, "I think you'd be fun to work with."
Well, I hope that's not too self-congratulatory, but it happens to be true.
Well, it is, isn't it? You're full of smiles and joy and optimism and passion for your craft. And that's why you look good and don't seem to age, because you're full of passion for filmmaking and for storytelling. And I want to raise my cup of tea to Marjorie and her cigarette.
Thank you, Natalie. It's been nothing but a pleasure. And if this is what it takes to bring us back together again, then I have to do another one.
Yeah, long live podcasts.
Gosh, you're not kidding. I'm quite used to sitting behind a microphone. This one I've treated rather badly, but...
We'll forgive you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leszek Burzynski, and thank you, Marjorie Burzynski, for being a smoker. Isn't he lovely? If Santa was British, we just met him. But younger, just to be clear, Santa's son. If Santa hopped across the pond, lit a lady's cigarette, and she bore a child, this was that child. I'm still at Pinewood, in my office. My story is still unfolding, although I'll be honest, not much has happened in the last hour and a half. The ribbon of events flowed in a somewhat predictable fashion. Nothing has hatched. Come on! You know what? I'm going to make something hatch in my imagination, and that is because I am a storyteller. It will crawl onto the top of my Epson printer and fall in love with me because it thinks I'm its mother. That's original. It will try to snack on my little plant, but spit it out because it's plastic. It's a plastic plant from IKEA. And I will have to conceal my small, extremely attractive dinosaur, and the unfolding story will become how I get Colin Firth to show up just when I'm looking extremely well lit. And he will realize that although serious and sometimes stern, I have a heart of gold because I'm raising a dinosaur. That's a movie. Consider this my copyright. You heard it here. It's the next E.T. Thank you guys for listening. And I mean that. I hope your story continues to unfold in a positive, happy, and enlightening way. And if it doesn't, get Netflix. Thank you, Leszek, for being lovely. And do you want to make a dinosaur movie? Go to thegrayescape.com for images from this episode. Subscribe on iTunes. Check out my site to see why my life is so crazy. nataliegray.com. Catch you next time on The Gray Escape.